It had started, as most things in Elias Vance's life did, with a misunderstanding. Elias was a veteran diplomat, a half-decent engineer, and, more recently, a reluctant human representative to the Interstellar Council of Stellar Nations. He had been to countless alien worlds, stood before monarchs, warlords, and artificial intelligences that ruled over entire planets. He'd mediated peace treaties, fixed engines in zero-G, and once talked a Zelzari battle priest out of executing him through nothing but sheer human stubbornness. But he had never imagined he'd find himself in this particular situation. It was supposed to be a simple night off. The Ivory Conclave, capital of the Zithri Dominion, was one of the most breathtaking cities in the galaxy. Suspended in an eternal twilight, its spires of biocrystal pulsed with soft, rhythmic lights, harmonizing with the natural electromagnetic fields of the world. The streets floated, seamlessly shifting with the movements of pedestrians. And the air was rich with scents, some pleasant, some less so, wafting from open-air markets where traders from a dozen species bartered over everything from exotic spices to plasma weaponry. Elias had spent weeks navigating the delicate political labyrinth of Zithri bureaucracy. His job? Ensuring that humanity's fledgling diplomatic ties with the Dominion didn't collapse into an interstellar incident. It had been exhausting. So when his work for the day was done, Elias had made his way to one of the lower district taverns, a place where off-duty warriors, traders, and engineers gathered to unwind. The establishment, a dimly lit den called the Sunken Fong, was exactly his kind of place. Loud, chaotic, and full of strong drinks. He hadn't meant to cause a diplomatic catastrophe. He had just been explaining human adaptability to a curious table of alien patrons. The group consisted of a heavily armored Scar warrior, a gelatinous THRXX merchant, and a towering, winged Vishari diplomat. They had been discussing the limitations of their species in extreme environments, when the topic had drifted to humans. No, really, Elias had said, leaning back with his drink in hand. Humans can do it in any position. Standing, sitting, even hanging upside down. We're built for it. The aliens had stared at him. Impossible, the Scar warrior had chittered, his mandibles clicking in skepticism. The Vishari's golden feathers ruffled. Even in high gravity? Low oxygen? Elias had laughed, waving a hand dismissively. Are you kidding? We do it underwater. In deserts. Zero-G, hell. We even invented ways to do it more efficiently. Silence fell over the table. The THRXX, whose gelatinous form constantly shifted in response to emotional stimuli, turned an odd shade of green. By the gods, humans truly are monsters. Elias blinked. Something was wrong. Wait, he said slowly, suddenly aware of the horrified stares from the surrounding tables. What exactly do you think I'm talking about? Before anyone could answer, the tavern doors slammed open. A procession of Zithri royal guards marched in sleek, insectoid figures clad in ceremonial black and silver exosuits, their weapons humming with restrained power. The gathered patrons fell silent as a figure emerged from their ranks. She was tall, elegant, and radiating authority. Queen Izara of the Zithri Dominion. Her sapphire blue skin shimmered under the dim lights, her forearms adorned with ceremonial rings that glowed faintly with bioluminescent energy. Her silver eyes, sharp as a plasma cutter, locked onto Elias with an unreadable expression. Elias gulped. He set down his drink. Can I help you? You? Her voice was smooth, but carried an edge of challenge. You claim that humans can perform in any position? The entire tavern held its breath. Elias's stomach dropped. I feel like I need more context before I answer that. A Scar warrior at the bar hissed. He is already dead. Queen Izara took a step closer. I heard your words. That humans are unmatched in adaptability. That no species can match them in versatility. Her lips curved into something between a smirk and a dare. I challenge you to prove it. Elias's brain went into overdrive. He had two choices. Refuse, which, given the murmurs in the crowd, would be seen as a cowardly retreat. Accept and commit himself to whatever the hell he had just agreed to. Could you clarify? Elias said slowly. What exactly you mean by prove it? Izara's smirk deepened. You will face the royal trial of capability. An audible gasp rippled through the tavern. The THRXX beside him promptly fainted into a gelatinous puddle. Elias's blood ran cold. He had no idea what that meant, but it definitely wasn't what he had originally intended. Then, the queen leaned in, her voice just above a whisper. I wish to see if humans are truly as capable as they claim. And, just like that, Elias realized that his fate was sealed. The trial was happening. The royal trial hall was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. A massive amphitheater carved from living crystal, it pulsed with shifting hues, reflecting the energy of the thousands of alien spectators gathered within. The tiers of seats stretched skyward, filled with dignitaries, warriors, and commoners alike, all waiting eagerly for the spectacle to begin. Elias, standing at the center of the arena, took a slow, steady breath. His fate had been sealed the moment he had opened his big, stupid mouth in that tavern. Humans can do it in any position, he had said. And now, the queen herself had challenged him to prove it. Elias had no idea what the royal trial of capability actually entailed, but from the way the crowd buzzed with anticipation, it was clear this was a big deal. High above, seated on a floating crystalline throne, Queen Azara watched him with an amused but unreadable expression. Her sapphire blue skin glowed faintly in the bioluminescent light, and her forearms rested elegantly on the throne's edges. Elias took a deep breath and turned to the royal arbiter, a tall, thin Zithari with elongated limbs and deep crimson markings on his chitinous exoskeleton. The arbiter lifted a ceremonial staff, its tip crackling with energy. The trial begins, his voice boomed. The human will now demonstrate his adaptability across the 5 pillars of Zithari excellence. The what now? A holographic display materialized in the air, listing out the 5 categories of the trial. Strength, endurance, precision, intelligence, creativity. Elias exhaled slowly. Okay, this wasn't completely terrible. These were more or less things humans were actually good at. Maybe, he could survive this after all. The arbiter turned to him. Are you prepared, human? Elias glanced at Queen Azara. She met his gaze, her silver eyes gleaming with challenge. He cracked his knuckles. Let's do this. A massive scar gladiator stomped onto the arena floor. 7 feet tall, covered in obsidian black armor plates, and carrying a boulder the size of a hovercar, the warrior let out a low, rumbling growl. Elias sighed. Of course it's a boulder lifting contest. The arbiter gestured. You must match or exceed the Scar's strength. Elias walked up to the boulder, gave it an experimental shove, and felt his spine immediately regret it. Yeah, no way he was going to outmuscle a walking tank. But humans didn't win through brute force. They improvised. Elias backed up, looked around the arena, then grabbed a steel support rod from a weapons rack. Using it as a makeshift lever, he wedged the rod under the boulder, positioned a smaller stone as a fulcrum, and, with a loud grunt, flipped the boulder end over end. The crowd gasped. The Scar warriors stared in shock. The arbiter nodded. Strength through ingenuity. Acceptable. Elias grinned. 1 down. 4 to go. Elias stood at the starting line of a long, winding obstacle course. Razor-sharp pendulums swung from above. Spike platforms retracted and extended. A lava pit bubbled ominously at the halfway mark. His opponent? A Vishari endurance flyer, a 4-winged, golden-feathered avian who could literally fly over half the obstacles. The horn sounded. Elias sprinted forward, vaulting over a rising platform. The Vishari soared overhead, gliding effortlessly through the air. But Elias knew something about long-distance endurance that a lot of aliens didn't. Humans weren't the fastest species in the galaxy, but they were built to outlast anything. As the race went on, the Vishari's wings began to tire. Hovering took energy. But Elias? He was still going, weaving through obstacles, his breathing controlled, his strides efficient. By the final stretch, the Vishari was sluggish, struggling to stay airborne. Elias pushed forward, gritting his teeth, and dived across the finish line first. The arena erupted in cheers. The arbiter nodded approvingly. Endurance through perseverance. Acceptable. Elias gave a breathless thumbs up. 2 down. 3 to go. Elias stood before a target range, lined with floating, rapidly moving holographic orbs. His opponent was a Zelzari sharpshooter, a species known for their perfect spatial awareness and pinpoint accuracy. They were handed plasma pistols. The countdown began. Elias narrowed his eyes. He wasn't a marksman, but he had one advantage. Humans had unparalleled hand-eye coordination. The signal blared. The Zelzari fired instantly, striking the first few targets in perfect succession. Elias, however, didn't fire right away. He waited, studied the pattern. Then, bam, 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 bam. He fired in sequence, each shot predicting the next orb's movement before it even got there. By the time the round ended, the score was tied. The arbiter paused, then nodded. Precision through strategy. Acceptable. Elias exhaled. 3 down. 2 to go. A holographic puzzle appeared before Elias. An intricate, shifting pattern of symbols and colors, designed to test logical reasoning and problem-solving speed. His opponent? A Circon Mindweaver, a species that could process complex calculations in real time. Elias cracked his knuckles. The puzzle began. The Mindweaver's tendrils flashed, solving equations at lightning speed. Elias, on the other hand, did what humans did best. He thought outside the box. Instead of solving each pattern individually, he recognized a larger sequence connecting all of them. He skipped unnecessary steps, jumping ahead using educated guesses and intuition. In the final moments, Elias inputted the last answer just as his opponent hesitated on a calculation. The display flashed green. Elias had won. The arbiter's mandibles twitched. Intelligence through unconventional thinking. Acceptable. For down. 1 to go. Queen Azara herself descended from her throne. The final trial, she said smoothly, is to create something entirely new. Elias blinked. That's it? She smiled. That is all? He thought for a moment, then grinned. He grabbed a blank datapad, pulled out his stylus, and, with a few strokes, drew a cartoonish doodle of the queen herself, complete with exaggerated fancy robes and 4 waving arms. He turned it around. The arena was silent. Then, the queen laughed. A deep, genuine, musical laugh. The arbiter hesitated, then finally said, "Creativity through humor. Acceptable." The crowd erupted in applause. Elias had passed all 5 trials. As the queen stepped closer, silver eyes filled with intrigue, Elias had the distinct feeling that things were far from over. Queen Azara herself descended from her throne. The final trial, she said smoothly, is to create something entirely new. Elias blinked. That's it? She smiled. That is all? He thought for a moment, then grinned. He grabbed a blank datapad, pulled out his stylus, and with a few strokes, drew a cartoonish doodle of the queen herself, complete with exaggerated fancy robes and 4 waving arms. He turned it around. The arena was silent. Then, the queen laughed. A deep, genuine, musical laugh. The arbiter hesitated, then finally said, "Creativity through humor. Acceptable." The crowd erupted in applause. Elias had passed all 5 trials. As the queen stepped closer, silver eyes filled with intrigue, Elias had the distinct feeling that things were far from over. The arbiter stepped forward, tapping his crystalline staff against the ground. "The queen has invoked the challenge of dominion," he announced. Elias barely kept from groaning. "Okay, and that is—" Queen Azara's smile widened. "It is a battle of wills, of control." The holographic display in the sky flickered, revealing the ancient laws of the Zithari trials. The challenge of dominion was a direct contest between the challenger and the queen herself. Elias swallowed hard. The crowd exploded with excitement. The stakes were immediately clear. If he lost, if he faltered in any way, then everything he had achieved so far would be meaningless. Azara's 4 arms spread wide, and she stepped forward. "Do you accept?" Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to walk away. But another part, the human part, couldn't resist a challenge. He cracked his knuckles. "Hell yeah." A massive ring of energy materialized around them. The arena floor shimmered, shifting into a hard-light battlefield. A blend of terrain, glowing platforms, and pulsing runes that looked like something out of a strategy sim. Elias felt a pull on his mind, like invisible strings trying to tug at his thoughts. He gritted his teeth. Izara was inside his head. Her voice was everywhere. "You think you can outmatch me?" Elias clenched his jaw, planting his feet. The challenge wasn't just physical strength. It was about control, adaptability, and dominance. Queen Izara moved first, launching a mental attack. The arena warped, shifting into a gravity well, forcing Elias to his knees. But humans didn't break. They pushed back. With sheer force of will, Elias stood, shoved back against the mental pressure, and the gravity field shattered. The crowd gasped. Izara's eyes widened. Just a fraction. "Impressive," she admitted. "But can you handle this?" The battlefield shifted again, turning into a storm of shifting illusions. Elias was surrounded by phantoms, distortions of his own memories, friends, family, faces from his past. They whispered his name, calling him to surrender. The trick was meant to shake his focus. But humans? Humans lived in chaos. Elias took a deep breath, centered himself, and focused on the one constant in every scenario, the Queen. He locked eyes with her. "You'll have to do better than that," he said. The illusions collapsed like glass. The Queen's expression shifted, her amusement flickering into something else. And that's when Elias went on the offensive that if this was a battle of wills, then Elias wasn't just going to survive it. He was going to win it. Instead of reacting, he pushed forward, flooding the mental battlefield with his own will. The Queen's control over the space faltered as Elias seized command. The illusions reversed. The battlefield changed. Now it was his domain. The floating platform solidified into structures from Earth's history. Ancient cities, neon-lit megacities, and towering skylines. The Queen staggered back, eyes flickering. Elias smirked. "What's wrong? Not used to playing on human terms?" For the first time, Queen Izara hesitated, and Elias pressed his advantage. The Queen tried one last assault, attempting to overpower Elias with a raw surge of mental dominance, a storm of energy and psychic force meant to break him completely. But Elias didn't budge. Instead, he laughed. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't arrogant. It was just humanity in its purest form, resilience through absurdity. And in that moment, Queen Izara understood. She wasn't just facing a warrior. She was facing a species that never knew when to quit. The final mental barrier collapsed. The Queen stumbled back, and Elias stood victorious. The arena fell silent. Then, a thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. Elias gasped for breath, his legs shaking, his mind feeling like he'd just sprinted a marathon through a hurricane. But he had won. He had beaten the Queen at her own game. Queen Izara studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his shock, she smiled. "Astonishing," she murmured. "You truly are unlike any being I have ever encountered." She turned to the Arbiter. "Declare it?" The Arbiter nodded. "By right of victory in the challenge of dominion." He turned to Elias. "The human has proven his adaptability and supremacy." The crowd erupted once more. Elias barely had time to process what had just happened before Izara stepped closer. "You intrigue me, human," she said, her voice carrying something deeper than just admiration. "Perhaps it is time I learn more about your kind personally." Elias's brain short-circuited. Was she flirting with him? Before he could react, she leaned closer, her silver eyes gleaming. "I look forward to seeing what else humans can do." Elias felt his stomach drop, because he had the sinking realization. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The roar of the arena had died down, but the weight of Elias's victory still hung heavy in the air. He stood at the center of the grand chamber, his breath still coming in ragged gasps. His mind felt like it had been through a grinder, but he had won. He had beaten Queen Izara, the supreme ruler of the Zithari Empire, at her own game. The implications of this fact were starting to dawn on him. The Queen stood before him, her silver eyes unreadable, her wings still partially unfurled. a rare sign of disrupted composure for a Zithari ruler. She was studying him, as if trying to decipher how a mere human had managed to withstand her full power. The crowd still watched in stunned silence. The Arbiter cleared his throat, his crystalline staff glowing faintly. By the laws of the Zithari Dominion, Elias Graham of Earth has not only succeeded in all trials, but has surpassed expectations in the challenge of Dominion. His voice echoed through the hall. Thus, by right of victory, the human is granted his earned reward, a boon from the Queen herself. The words sank in. Elias blinked. Wait, I get a boon? The Queen tilted her head, her wings shifting slightly. Indeed, she said, a slow smirk forming. It is our way. 100 thoughts rushed through Elias's mind. Fame? Power? Wealth beyond imagination? The ability to leave this place alive without being hunted by every Zithari warlord whose pride he had just crushed? He was still processing it all when Queen Azara suddenly stepped forward. And then, she dropped to one knee. The entire chamber gasped. Elias froze. Did the Queen of an interstellar empire just kneel before him? The Arbiter's mandibles clicked in disbelief. The Zithari nobles watching from the balcony were visibly struggling to comprehend what was happening. But Queen Azara remained still, her eyes locked on Elias's. You have bested me, she said. And in doing so, you have proven what I long suspected. Elias's pulse thundered in his ears. You humans, she continued, are uniquely dangerous. You defy logic. You resist dominance. You adapt and overcome where others would crumble. She placed one of her 4 hands over her chest, just above the biocrystalline plating of her royal garb. Thus, I recognize you, not as a mere challenger, but as a force of reckoning. The hall was dead silent. Elias had no idea what to say. Then, Azara rose, and the next words shook the chamber. By the traditions of the Zithari, I offer you a place at my side. Elias's brain short-circuited. A place at your... Wait. Hold up. He took a step back. Are you saying what I think you're saying? The Queen's smirk widened. The Arbiter stepped forward, his tone suddenly somber. By Zithari law, when a queen acknowledges a rival as her equal, she may choose to bind their fates together, through an oath of unity. Elias felt the color drain from his face. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, he muttered. The Queen's expression held something both amused and serious. It is no jest, she said smoothly. You may name any reward you desire, and I will grant it. But if you accept my offer, she stepped closer. You will become something far greater than just a victor. Elias swallowed hard. This wasn't just about getting out of here with his life. This was about power, influence, standing at the side of the most powerful ruler in the sector. He could change everything. But was that something he even wanted? Elias's mind raced, refuse the offer, take his victory, and go back to being just a human mechanic who happened to shake an empire. Accept and become something else entirely. The weight of the decision crushed him. But he was human, and humans did the impossible. He took a deep breath and looked Queen Azara in the eye. I'll accept, he said. The hall erupted. Some cheered. Some shouted in protest. Some stood in stunned silence. The Queen? She laughed. Then it is settled, she declared, turning to the Arbiter. Prepare the pact of accord. The Arbiter hesitated. My Queen? Are you certain? Azara's gaze hardened. He has proven himself. I have made my decision. The Arbiter nodded slowly. As you command. Elias still wasn't entirely sure what he'd just agreed to. But as the Queen extended a hand, he grasped it firmly. He had no idea what came next. But one thing was certain. His life was never going to be the same again. The ceremony was unlike anything Elias had ever witnessed. At the center of the Zithari Royal Hall, a massive structure woven from crystalline metal and living energy, he stood on a raised dais beside Queen Azara. 1,000 alien dignitaries and warlords filled the colossal amphitheater, their glowing eyes and cybernetic implants reflecting the ambient light. This was it, the moment he officially became the first human in history to stand as an equal to a Zithari queen. The Arbiter, the ancient keeper of their laws, raised his staff. Let it be known across the Dominion, his voice echoed. Elias Graham, human of Earth, has been granted the pact of accord by the will of Queen Azara. By this decree, he stands as her chosen equal, bound in purpose, bound in fate. A wave of mixed reactions swept through the crowd. Some cheered, recognizing Elias's victory as a testament to the Queen's wisdom. Others muttered in outrage, struggling to accept that an alien, a human, had gained such a position. Elias, for his part, was still trying to process what had just happened. He had gone from a mechanic barely scraping by to a recognized figure in an empire of trillions. And somehow, he felt like this was only the beginning. After the ceremony, Azara led Elias to a private chamber high in the royal palace. The view was breathtaking. A massive window overlooked the swirling stars and orbital cities of the Zithari homeworld. "You understand what you've agreed to, don't you?" she asked, her voice softer now, more personal. Elias exhaled. "I'm still figuring that part out." The Queen turned to face him fully, her piercing silver eyes studying him. "You are not my subordinate, nor a mere advisor," she said. "You are my equal in this pact, and that means our fates are now bound." Elias let that sink in. "So if I mess up," he said, "it reflects on you?" Azara smirked. "Precisely." He rubbed his temples. "No pressure, then." The Queen chuckled, but then her expression turned serious. "The real challenge begins now, Elias," she said. "Many within my court already seek to undermine this alliance. Others will want to test you." He nodded. "Figured as much. There will be attempts on your life," she added bluntly. Elias blinked. "Wait, what?" The Queen's wings twitched in amusement. "Did you think all my rivals would simply accept this?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Great. So now I have to deal with assassination attempts too." "Yes," Azara said, a glint of challenge in her eyes. "But I suspect that's exactly the kind of thing a human like you thrives on." Elias sighed. "You really have a lot of faith in me, huh?" "I do," she said, and for the first time, her tone carried something genuine, almost admiring. "Humans have an annoying habit of surviving impossible odds." Elias let out a breath. "Guess I'll have to keep that reputation going." The news of Elias's ascension sent shockwaves across the Zithari Dominion and beyond. Every major power in the sector now had questions. Who was this human? How had he managed to best the Queen? What did this mean for the delicate balance of power? Some factions saw it as a bold move, a sign that the Queen was expanding her vision for the Dominion. Others saw it as an insult, a humiliation of Zithari superiority. And then there were those who saw it as an opportunity. A shadowy transmission arrived that night, intercepted by palace security. It contained a simple message. "You are a disruption, Elias Graham. We will restore order." The assassins were already moving. Elias didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, as he stepped into the Queen's war chamber, he was met with stares from her generals and advisors. Some looked at him with disdain, others with curiosity. Azara was already seated at the head of a vast holographic display, detailing the galactic map and major political movements. "You're just in time," she said. "We have a problem." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Just one?" The Queen smirked, but then her expression grew serious. "A faction of high-ranking nobles is already attempting to challenge my decision," she said. "They're mobilizing forces in the outer sectors, claiming I've compromised the throne by aligning with you." Elias frowned. "So they're coming after me?" Azara shook her head. "No, they're coming after us." He exhaled. "Guess we're at war, then." The Queen gave him a sharp, assessing look. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Elias thought about it. He was a mechanic, a man who, just days ago, was fixing engines on backwater worlds. Now he was standing beside an alien queen, making decisions that could shake the fate of an empire. He should have been terrified. But instead, he grinned. "Not at all," he said. "Humans can handle any position, right?" The Queen laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound. "Yes," she said, her silver eyes gleaming. "And that is what makes you dangerous." Elias Graham had won the impossible battle, but the war was only beginning. His presence in the Zithari court had already shattered centuries of tradition, and many forces were already moving to either support or destroy him. But one thing was certain, the galaxy would never be the same again. And Elias? He was just getting started,